I got another library haul today. I got a whole bunch of quilting books that were published in 2023 that I can show you now. These are books that people had been borrowing, so I couldn't show them to you in my last 2023 library haul video, but now they're ready and so I can show them. Let's get right into it. Hello everyone, this is Shalina. Welcome to my channel, Quilt and Color, where I talk about all things related to art. Here are all the books we'll be reviewing today. This one is a fiction book, Marie Boswick, Esme Cahill Fails Spectacularly. We have Everyday Quilting, The Complete Beginner's Guide by Jennifer Fulton. We have Exploring Art Quilts with Studio Art Quilt Associates, Inc. We have Carolyn Forster's Hand Stitch Quilts. Choose from 27 block designs and hand piece your own unique quilts. We have Learn to Make Your Own Heirloom Pinecone Quilts, Keeping Tradition Alive by Betty Ford Smith. We have Kay Fassett's Quilts by the Sea. And we have Patchwork T-shirt Quilts by Amelia Johanson. Let's get right to reviewing the books. Okay, let's talk about Marie Boswick's Esme Cahill Fails Spectacularly. Marie Boswick is a New York Times and USA Today best-selling author. She writes a lot of books about quilts. This one's a fiction book. It's talking about Esme Cahill, who works at a publishing company but was let go, and so then she has to move back home to where her grandparents live in Asheville, North Carolina. Esme found a lot of art quilts that Adele had made in her attic. Esme thinks she has failed spectacularly, recently fired from her New York City publishing job, divorced from her husband, and possessing little more than a broken down car and a pile of unfinished manuscripts. She drives home to Asheville, North Carolina at the request of her late grandmother Adele, who had begged Esme just before she died to return to the place she grew up. There, Esme discovers the once charming lakeside retreat run by her family is sliding towards financial ruin. So with the help of her grandfather George, estranged mother Robin, and a traveling chef Dawes, they set to work. And during an exploration of the attic, Esme unearths something magical, a trove of museum-worthy art quilts sewn by Adele. Piecing together the inspiration behind the quilts, Esme discovers a forgotten chapter of her family history and her grandmother's untold story, that of a gifted artist who never received her due. So it goes back and forth between her grandmother's story and her story. So you can see this is Adele's story in January 1942. Each of the chapters has this picture at the front. Chapter 2 is about Esme in New York in 1997. So it goes back and forth sometimes, but it's very easy to keep up with. It's only 2 people, and you can tell by the years and the people that are mentioned. And it's 356 pages. This is Everyday Quilting, The Complete Beginner's Guide, 20 Plus Cozy Projects by Jennifer Fulton. Reprinted and updated from Idiot's Guides Quilting. It's getting ready to quilt, selecting fabric, preparing and cutting fabric, piecing quilt blocks, piecing techniques, advanced piecing techniques. Applique, assembling a quilt top, preparing a quilt for quilting, quilting a quilt, and gallery of projects. Getting ready to quilt. What is a quilt? Preparing your sewing machine. hand piecing supplies, machine piecing supplies, hand applique supplies, machine applique supplies, hand quilting supplies, machine quilting supplies, creating a design wall, selecting fabric, considering color and value and saturation and scale and style, select fabrics for a project, preparing and cutting fabric, common measurements, how to resize a pattern. When I was a beginning quilter, I bought a book like this that has all the information that you need about quilting. I think for a very beginning quilter, it's too much information. I think for a very beginning quilter, it's better just to pick a pattern and then learn exactly how to make it rather than have all these choices about machine versus hand quilting, that sort of information. Choosing which blocks to make, what stitches to use. It just seems like, for me, it was too much information to know what to do, and sometimes it's better just to get started and then decide what you want to learn next, instead of learning everything all at once like this book does. But books like this would be great for intermediate and expert quilters, because then they know how to do more things. This, how to fix block problems, would be nice actually to have in a regular book though. And this is nice, the mug rug practice project to start first. That this teaches you how to make all of these blocks, but then you don't know how many you need or what you're going to do with it once you put them together. Practice project, start gazing. That'd be nice too, to be able to use those blocks. It's nice that it does walk you through making the quilts if you know that this is what your end result was going to be and that you wanted to buy this much fabric. Because to me, it's like you made all these blocks, but then you find out here that you wanted a different color. Advanced piecing, advanced piece techniques. I think this would work well in a class setting though, because they teach you the blocks and then they teach you how to put them together in that particular quilt. Advanced piece techniques. Looks like more of a class that they walk you step by step on how to make each of these things. Curve piecing, Y seams, foundation, paper piecing, English paper piecing. And there's one quilt that has foundation blocks. And see, none of the other techniques that were learned are used in this quilt. Applique, needle turn, raw edge, turn edged, turn edge fusible machine. And then there's a practice project at the end. Funky flowers wall hanging. Assembling a quilt tops. Choose a block setting. Sew quilt blocks together. Add setting triangles. Add sashing. Add straight mitered special borders. This is a good reference book overall. Peppermint Twist Twin Quilt. Preparing a quilt for quilting. Quilting a quilt. Hand quilting, tying, machine quilting, free motion, square up your quilt, bind a quilt, add a label, add a hanging sleeve, how to wash and store them, and here's the gallery, strawberry preserves, Princess Charlotte, elephants on parade, that's cute. Life in a tide pool, conga line lap quilt, cute. There's a different colorway, that's nice. Star-crossed wall hanging. There's a different colorway also. Swimming in the gene pool. There's another colorway. Snake Eyes lap quilt. Mirage. That's cute. And they can be laid out in different ways and different colors. Interwoven. Different prints. Fall romance table runner in different colors. Foundation books. And there's a glossary and an index, which is nice. Credits. Get ready to quilt every day. Inquiringquilter.com and everyday quilting. Everyday quilting. This one is Exploring Art Quilts with Studio Art Quilt Associates, Inc. This is Volume 3, Museum Quality. Like the cow. This book is made from SAQUA, an international nonprofit organization whose mission is to promote the art quilt. It was founded in 1989. We have some quilts that are in this issue. So it looks like there's some featured articles, some juried galleries, and then interviews with a bunch of quilt artists. And there's an index at the end. They also have a magazine that they put together. Primal Forces, Earth. An important collection of contemporary quilt art. Michael Cummins. They create themes and they have artists make quilts based on that theme, and then they take them around to different museums and places to showcase them and sometimes sell them. There's an interview with Pat Bishop. Interview with Esther Bornemiza. California Art Quilt Revolution. That's interesting. The different layers. just the different shapes of the quilts make it so much more interesting compositionally than the regular rectangles we're used to seeing for quilts. And then the different strips of quilts. This one looks three-dimensional. Move over Matisse. Yeah, that was Susan G. Yeah, that was Maria Shaw. Quilts in museums. Some of these quilt artists teach classes, so if you like their style, there are ways that you can learn how to use that style. Quilts and Culture, the uniquely American story of the Renwick Gallery collection. It's a nice playful quilt, this one too. Looks like some people dye their own fabric. It'd be great to look at these quilts in more detail and read the interviews. And there's an index at the back and directions on how you can join the global community. This is Carolyn Forster's hand-stitched quilts. Choose from 27 block designs and hand-piece your own unique quilts. Full-size patchwork templates included. A pretty elaborate quilt right there with so many different blocks. I like the colors on it. So they have the blocks. Adding them together, tacking them up. So this is another one. There's only one quilt at the end, but because there's so many blocks and you can mix and match them, you can make the quilt your own. Is it slower to stitch by hand? Huh? It says no. Sewing by hand is not slower than sewing on a machine. If you have access to your machine and can sit and sew at it, then you'll be faster than a hand piecer sitting next to you. But you can only sew on it when you sit on it. A hand piecer can stitch anywhere, anytime. Hand stitching is portable and social. You can stitch with family and friends while watching TV or at the sports ground. Well, that makes sense. That's true. But there are times when you won't have access to your machine, but you can have access to your fabric and needle. The material, the equipment. Keeping things organized, piecing, book of blocks. There's a lot of blocks here to pick from. 2-patch and 4-patch blocks. There's some basic blocks. And then some more elaborate blocks. Things that would be hard to do by machine are easier to do by hand. This one too. These, likewise. Some of these are a lot easier to do by hand than they would be by machine. Wow. Making the quilt your own. How do you choose your own block combinations? Sewing the quilt together. Sewing the units together, tacking and basting. Hand quilting. I guess if you're going to hand stitch, you might as well hand quilt. Binding the quilt. A lot of details about the back. Labeling and aftercare. And then the templates are full-size templates. Hand stitch quilts. Through one sampler quilt, learn how to patchwork and quilt wholly by hand from start to finish in this accessible how-to book by best-selling author and teacher Carolyn Forster. Learn how to make your own heirloom pinecone quilts, keeping tradition alive. Began making pinecone quilts in 2004 under the apprenticeship of Miss Sue, 92-year-old African-American woman in Sebring, Florida. I like the colors, the purple and the yellow on this one. Dedication, contents. You can make a hoop art quilt. This is pretty. Forward, introduction. There's a story about Miss Sue here. It's really interesting reading. The G's Ben experience. The research experience. Beautiful picture. Love the texture of the pinecone quilts. You can see how many layers of fabric build up as you add rows of triangles. There's Lucy Minga with one of her pine bar quilts. History and cultural origins of these quilts. Looks like it started in the South. I haven't really heard a lot about these quilts since the 80s when I first began quilting, but These are really fascinating. I'm glad that they're coming back. Showing the tradition. Gallery of Vintage and Contemporary Pinecone Quilts. Wow, look at how big that is. I like that you can make them into little tiny ones and then just attach them to the quilt instead of having to combine them all in one quilt. This one just seems like it'd be a little bit easier, a good way to practice and start before you go dedicate yourself and your time into a bigger one like this. Antique Prairie Point Quilt. Another small one. I like these really close-up details of this. I guess when I first learned about this, I thought I would have a really hard time placing them all exactly correctly. And the fact that they don't all piece exactly the same, it gives me some more confidence that maybe I can make this, that it's not as exacting a quilt as I was expecting it to be. And look at all the rings of green. Eye of a Storm. Betty and Butler's Cockleburr quilt. The detail of their quilt. Susie Q. Detail of Susie Q. It's another one where you can see that there's some flexibility and variation of that. Long Way Home. Oh, look at all the layers of colors here. It's hand quilted. The Healing Quilt. Little Pink Victorian Garden. Caribbean Dream. I like the colors on this one too. Blue and yellow. Toulouse. Midnight Stars. Veronica Ann. Eternity Folk Festival. And then there's directions on how to make your own pinecone quilt. The basic technique, how to add layers, and how to bind the quilt. Pinecone projects to get you started. You can make a pillow. It's beautiful. I like the red on this one too. Shadow box, wall hanging variation. Pinecone baby quilt. You can start with a really small thing like a corsage. A table cover. Wall art. Round pinecone table variation. G's bed inspired patchwork pine burr quilt like this too, where you can have a layer the pine cones on top of the collage of fabric. And then a book about the author. Betty Ford Smith was born in New Rochelle, New York, raised in Mount Vernon. This is her first book. Wow, it was a fabulous first book. This is Kaffe Fassett's Quilts by the Sea. Celebrating 25 years of our Patchwork and Quilting series featuring Liza Pryor Lucy. Location photography by Debbie Patterson. Introduction. Looks like they went to more seasides for these pictures on this. Beach sides. Doesn't really say what country or what area. I like this quilt. When I first saw it, it reminded me of the quilt that was in the other book. This one, flowery vases, but they are different from each other. They both have similar background, but the other one has a little bit more. But you can see this is different because it has a different layer on top, and the vases are a little bit different. Some of them have tops on them. A lot of pictures without quilts on them. Here's another quilt. Dusky ribbons. Water garden. Hourglass stripes. Lorna Doone. Blooming snowballs. Cabanas. Pastel Fiesta. As you can see, most of the books have introduction to the quilts, and then the directions are in the back of Vintage Stars. Maroon frames. Autumn postcard. Jiggery pokery cushion. Fruit sorbet cushion. Marble tile cushion. And then the little jars. Oh, this one says, the original of this quilt in my 4th book in this series didn't attract much attention, but I was fond of it nevertheless. Actually, I was fond of it too. It was one of the quilts that I had put on my to make list, partly because I love and also have a good collection of oriental vases. Our brighter prints come into their own in this new version, with the striped tops to each block creating a good graphic repetition. The beach huts behind were helpfully painted in just the right high pastels to make our quilt sing. I like this one better with the stripes too. Color garden. Flower boxes. Succulent hexagons. Shady parterre. Spot swatches. Green squares. Cool stars. Shadow boxes. Love in the Mist. And then there's the directions. The one thing I noticed about the quilt that we were talking about, the Vases quilt, is that each of the fabrics, oh, this is nice too. Cabanas. Is that the one thing I noticed about these little jars quilt is that each of these, the background squares, the background rectangles are pieced separately. Instead of piecing them as a strip and then subcutting them, which is what I would have done, they cut individual yellow background squares and individual white background squares before they put it together. You can see that they're making them separately instead of subcutting. And this last picture is really amazing to me, that they're going up the mountains to photograph the quilts. I guess I always assumed that they would have a big team of people who would do that, not that they were doing it themselves. And there's a little glossary, little patchwork and quilting know-how. There's not a lot of information, just 2 pages worth, but they're small enough print, I think, that has a lot of information. There's another page. And a glossary at the end also. Okay, Fassett's Quilts by the Sea. This one, Patchwork T-shirt Quilts, The Fabric Lover's Approach to Keepsakes and Preserving Memories by Amelia Johanson. This one looks hot off the press. I like that they're making a book about patchwork t-shirt quilts, because I think a lot of new quilters would like to do that. People who don't normally quilt would also like to learn how to use our t-shirts. Amelia is the writer, but there's a bunch of other people who also helped her with this book. So there's an introduction, helpful tools and notions, techniques to know, working with t-shirts, learning to quilt, and then there's the projects. There's a nice variety of projects for using t-shirts. Why quilt your t-shirts, helpful tools and notions, quilt rulers, tracing, interfacing is the most important thing about making t-shirt quilts. Because t-shirts are stretchy, you do have to stabilize them. It just makes it so much easier when you do use a stabilizer. Different techniques, seam allowances, pressing. There's more about stabilizing the shirt. Joining logos, that's nice. Because I hadn't really thought about combining the logos into one block. Extending the fabric if your logo is too small. Fussy cutting. Calculating the binding. Is it all long arm and quilting? It's interesting that they're talking about long arm quilting and not hand quilting or machine quilting, which I don't think would be appropriate for new quilters. Easily you can hand quilt or machine quilt a t-shirt quilt. And then there's the projects. You can make a body bag that uses 2 to 3 shirts. A dorm pillow, which just uses 1 shirt. A concert tee wall hanging that uses 4 shirts. I like all the different layouts for the way you can use the t-shirts. This one uses 10 shirts with its stars. Adds a nice variety. Here you can use prints, or you can also use t-shirts inside in the middle, depending on how many you had. Kid character wall hangings. This one just uses 1. This is a nice, good beginning project. Rectangle block shirt, 5 shirts. I like that the layout isn't the straight side-by-side setting. T-shirt tote for a cause. This uses 4 to 5 shirts. Two block t-shirt quilt. This uses 7 shirts. Oh, there's 2 different blocks. There's the rail fence and this one. Big flight t-shirt quilt uses 5 shirts. I like the fact that the t-shirts are pretty hidden amongst the different blocks, so it's not as obvious a t-shirt quilt, but it still gives you the memories that you have for all the shirts that you used. Improv column t-shirt quilt. This one uses 30 to 40 t-shirts. Okay, so they added a whole bunch of different t-shirts together. Waterfall t-shirt quilt uses 23 shirts. And you can obviously adapt them to different number of shirts. Modern oblique t-shirt quilt uses 15 shirts. I like the way this looks with the optical illusion. Funfetti caramel t-shirt quilt uses 5 t-shirts with logos. Little improv piece in there, although I think they have templates. Onesie t-shirt quilt. That's so cute. The little kitties t-shirts, onesies. And there's a glossary in the back and an index. photo credits. And these are the author and the contributors. I watch a lot of YouTube videos by Stephanie So Big. Must-have guide to t-shirt quilting. So what do I think about all these books? None of these books show anything new or innovative, in my opinion. All of these books remind me of when I first began to learn how to quilt back when I was in my late 20s, early 30s. Looks like there's a throwback to things that new quilters need to learn, but most of the information, it seems like, is pretty similar to what I had learned back then. These are great books for beginners, and I'm glad that they're bringing them back out again so that beginners can learn how to quilt and get their own quilting bug.